Hi, this is Ritter Robinson with Urgent Security and Firewatch, and I've spent the past 15 years helping properties in the Washington, D.C. metro area get reliable Firewatch services that comply with the Firewatch regulations of their jurisdictions. You think you know Firewatch rules because you've managed properties in Maryland or Virginia, but Washington, D.C. plays by a completely different set of rules. And missing even one step can mean fines, shutdowns, or even jail time. But here's the scariest part. Most managers don't realize just how strict and specific the fire marshal's requirements in Washington, D.C. really are. If you want your building to stay open, safe, and prevent fines, you need to know exactly what the District of Columbia fire regulations require, because it is completely different from everywhere else. Let's walk through it. Imagine you manage a property in Washington, D.C., and you just found out the fire alarm is malfunctioning. You get that uncomfortable feeling that tells you this is going to be a long day. The first part is easy. Call the repair company. But next, a question comes to mind. Does my building need to be on Firewatch? Here's how you determine the answer to that. Firewatch is required when any part of your fire alarm or fire sprinkler system is out of service or malfunctioning for over 4 hours. That does not mean wait 4 hours and then call a Firewatch company to get them out there. The 4-hour window is intended to allow for testing and scheduling maintenance. Therefore, you should act quickly and get Firewatch in place as soon as you're aware of the problem with your fire alarm or sprinkler. But here's what most people miss. Firewatch is only required when the building is occupied. Occupied means that any human being is present within the building. Scheduling for residential buildings is fairly easy. Residential space is considered occupied 24/7. Therefore, Firewatch is needed 24/7. But commercial buildings are different. Remember, Firewatch must be on site whenever the building is occupied. At this point, you may be saying to yourself, I know what occupied means. Well, unfortunately, many commercial property owners make the mistake of thinking occupied only applies to customers. I can't tell you how many times I heard a commercial property manager tell me, well, our building is open 9 to 5. And then I say, what time does the cleaning service leave? Oh, they leave at 8. Exactly. Hate to tell you, but cleaners are people too. Being occupied includes employees, janitors, contractors, even the people repairing your alarm system. If there is anyone in the building, Firewatch must be on duty. Who can do Firewatch? In our example scenario, you now know your building needs to be on Firewatch and when service should be scheduled. But unlike Maryland or Virginia, you can't use in-house staff. Only licensed security agencies can provide Firewatch service in the District of Columbia. But unfortunately, most companies prioritize long-term contracts, not last-minute short-term Firewatch. In fact, most security companies don't even offer Firewatch services at all. And you don't want just any ordinary security agency. They should have significant Firewatch experience and an in-depth understanding of the regulations. Be sure to find a company who understands what is required and has systems in place to get short-term projects staffed quickly and managed properly. Picking the wrong company can be a horrible experience. So the first thing you should do is contact a security company that specializes in Firewatch. But even the fastest company can't get officers on site instantly. Therefore, you must immediately assign your own employees to perform Firewatch patrols until the professional Firewatch officers arrive. As of now, you know your building needs to be on Firewatch. You have your in-house staff doing Firewatch patrols for the time being, and you've selected a company to contact for the Firewatch services themselves. But how many fire watch officers do you need? Washington, D.C. has a specific formula that is used to determine how many fire watch officers are required for a building. That formula is 1 officer per 2 floors, 1 officer in the control room or lobby area, 1 extra officer for every 6 officers to provide breaks. No fire watch officers can be permitted to cover more than 2 floors. Therefore, if your building has an odd number of floors, like, for example, it has 5 floors, that 5th floor requires its own fire watch officer, even though it does not patrol 2 floors. Let's see how this works in real building. If you have a building with 4 floors, you'll need 2 officers for the floors, 1 officer for the fire control room. That means you have a total of 3 officers. What if the building has 7 floors? You need 4 officers to cover the floors, 1 officer for the control room, and then you need 1 breaker because you have 6 or more people. That means you need a total of 7 officers. 14 floors, you need 7 people for the floors because there's 1 for every 2 floors, 1 person for the fire control room, and 2 breakers because you have 2 sets of 6, which means you need 2 breakers. As a result, 14 floors requires 10 people. Here is a critical rule that everyone needs to remember. Every fire watch must have 2 or more fire watch officers. If your building has 1 floor, you still need a minimum of 2 officers. 1 for patrols and 1 for the control room. You should never have a 1-person fire watch in Washington, D.C. Most jurisdictions require you to report an out-of-service alarm by simply calling the non-emergency number and telling them. In Washington, D.C., the fire marshal requires a formal fire watch plan submission and has stricter requirements than any other jurisdiction in the DMV area. Therefore, what works elsewhere is not going to work here. The fire watch plan needs to describe the situation, the patrol schedule, who's providing the fire watch, and other details. We've made it easy for you to create your fire watch plan with a free tool at firewatchplan.com. All you have to do is go to firewatchplan.com, answer a few quick questions, and your customized plan will be emailed to you instantly. All you need to do at that point is copy and paste it on your letterhead, and it's ready to submit. But there's one important step that is missed countless times. When you submit the fire watch plan, you must also attach a copy of the signed contract with the company providing the fire watch services. The plan demonstrates that you know the rules. The agreement proves you hired a qualified company to do the fire watch patrol. No plan, no contract, no approval. Failure to submit a fire watch plan and contract can result in hefty fines. Follow the rules. The DC Fire Marshal does not mess around. As I previously mentioned, the plan demonstrates that you know the rules, and the agreement proves you hired a qualified company to do the fire watch patrols. Now you have to make sure that the patrols are being conducted and documented properly. Each patrol must be listed on the fire watch patrol log, and those records must remain on site ready for inspection. The regulations require officers to patrol all affected areas at intervals set by the fire marshal, usually once per hour. Here at Urgent Security and Fire Watch, we take it a step further by patrolling every 30 minutes. More frequent patrols provide the added benefit of increased safety and prevents unexpected violations. Remember, fire watch officers are human beings. And just like any other human being, if you tell them to do something every hour, sometimes it may be an hour, at other times it may be 65 minutes, or even 90 minutes. It happens. The problem is, every time they take longer than an hour, your property is in violation of the fire code. Setting patrols for every 30 minutes allows for the occasional delayed patrols without violating the fire code. If for some reason one of their patrols is 35 minutes or even an hour, the patrols are still within the required time lane. The patrols are still within the required time frame and fully compliant with the fire marshal's regulation, with the fire marshal's requirements. Proper fire watch keeps you from being fined and protects the lives of everyone inside the building, including your own. At this point, in our scenario, it's been a few days and finally your system has been repaired and is 100% back in service. Yay! However, we're still not out of the woods quite yet. The fire watch cannot end until the fire marshal approves it to end. You have to wait for their approval, even if the system is fully repaired. You must email the fire marshal requesting permission to terminate the fire watch and include documentation from the repair company confirming that the system has been repaired. At that point, the fire marshal will usually send an inspector to the location. They typically arrive within 1 to 2 hours of when they're notified. Keep in mind, they will not send an inspector without documentation from the repair company. Fortunately, the fire marshal's office in Washington, D.C. is one of the most responsive departments in D.C. government, but inspections are not available 24/7. They primarily are available during the fire marshal's office hours of 8:30 to 4:30. I've seen them do inspections as late as 8 p.m., but that is not necessarily a common occurrence. Inspectors also work on Saturdays, but there are fewer inspectors available. Therefore, if your system is fixed at 6 p.m. on a Saturday, you will likely not come off fire watch until sometime Monday morning. Some property managers make the mistake of ending the fire watch when the fire alarm is repaired instead of waiting for approval to terminate the fire watch. Or worse, they try to save money by canceling fire watch or reducing the number of people before the alarm is fixed. These are costly mistakes. Don't do it. Bad decisions can have serious consequences when it comes to fire watch compliance. Hefty fines, sometimes thousands of dollars per day, could happen. The fire marshal can also close your building or require you to pay off-duty firefighters to do the fire watch, since they can't trust you to hire a company. Please believe, hiring firefighters is never cheap. You can also end up in jail. If there is a fire and someone is injured due to fire watch not being there to alert the building, you could be prosecuted for criminal negligence or reckless endangerment. It is far better to do the right thing and follow the rules. Here's some good news. Most property insurance policies consider fire watch as a positive measure that benefits them by reducing the risk of loss from fire damage. As a result, in many cases, they'll reimburse you for your fire watch expense. Be sure to contact your insurance company to make them aware of your situation whenever your building is on fire watch. Keep in mind, insurance companies are always looking for reason to deny claims. It is important that you follow the fire marshal's guidelines and keep copies of the approved fire watch plan and patrol logs on file in case your insurer requests them. If you don't notify them or document properly, you could be left paying out of pocket and never get reimbursed. Congratulations, you now know everything required to comply with Washington, D.C.'s fire watch regulations. All of this can be made much easier by selecting the right company for your location's fire watch services. Not all companies deliver the same level of service. For true peace of mind, look for a company that combines in-depth knowledge about the fire code compliance with strong quality controls. Here are a few things to look for. Do they have a person responsible for guiding you through the fire watch approval process from start to finish? Do they use a time clock system that uses GPS geofencing to ensure officers are on site when clocking in and out? Is there a process to remotely monitor patrols, and review paperwork documentation regularly to make sure that it's compliant with the regulations. These extra steps aren't required by law, but they set best companies apart from the not so great ones. I'm sure you'll agree that we discussed a lot in this video, and it's hard to remember every step in the process. Be sure to follow the link below to download our free Firewatch checklist. It guides you step by step through the entire process. I've also included a link to our online Firewatch guide where you'll find detailed information about Firewatch regulations for every jurisdiction in the DC metro area. Until next time, this is Riddle Robinson with Urgent Security and Firewatch, wishing you an amazing day.